Hi, today we'll be uh, today we'll be talking about multiple topics regarding phonetics and phonology. Those include phonetics and phonology focus, the phoneme, minimal pairs, homophones, homographs, rhoticity,
Varieties of English, transcription, stress within the utterance, content, and function words, the non-stressed syllables and the weak sounds, weak forms of function words.
The text you're now seeing on the screen is an extract from the book Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone that we choose so we could exemplify the topics that we will talk about later on. And now we will read it to you.
It was on the corner of the street that he noticed the first sign of something peculiar, a cat reading a map. For a second, Mr. Dursley didn't realize what he had seen. Then he shook his head around to look again. There was a chubby cat standing on the corner of the private drive, but there wasn't a map inside. What could he have been thinking of? It must have been a trick of the light. Mr. Dursley blinked and stared at the cat. It stared back. As Mr. Dursley drove around the corner and up the road, he watched the cat in his mirror. It was now reading the sign that said private drive. No, looking at the sign. Cats couldn't read maps or signs. Mr. Dursley gave himself a little shake and put the cat out of his mind. As he turned toward town, he thought of nothing except a large order of drills he was hoping to get that day.
But on the edge of town, drills were driven out of his mind by something else. As he sat in the usual morning traffic jam, he couldn't help noticing that there seemed to be a lot of strangely dressed people about. People in cloaks. Mr. Darcy couldn't bear people who dressed in funny clothes, the get-ups you saw on young people. He supposed this was some stupid new fashion. He drummed his fingers on the steering wheel, and his eyes fell on a huddle of these weirdos standing quite close by. They were whispering excitedly together. Mr. Darcy was enraged to see that a couple of them weren't young at all. Why? That man had to be older than he was, and wearing an emerald green cloak. The nerve of him! But then it struck Mr. Darcy that it was probably some silly stunt. These people were obviously collecting for something. Yes, that would be it. The traffic moved on, and a few minutes later, Mr. Darcy arrived in Grunning's parking lot, his mind back on drills.
Okay, so phonetics and phonology is our first topic, and they are disciplines that study the speech sounds that humans make in order to communicate. They are interrelated, but there are clear differences between them.
So, phonetics deals with the study of speech sounds, how we make them, hear them, how they're received by the ears and perceived by the brain, and how we describe sounds. It is a precise discipline, and some of the questions this discipline asks are, how are these sounds produced? What are the articulatory features that participate in the process of producing a sound? What are their acoustic preferences? How can sounds be described and classified using articulatory and acoustic information? And how can it be made visible in writing with the help of a limited, manageable inventory of symbols? So, earlier we mentioned how phonetics is precise, and we're going to give you an example to show you this. In the text we decided to use, we can find the word little. The t sound is different depending on who is producing it. If someone from England says little, the t sound will be stronger and the person will release air because of the pressure of the blade of the tongue against the alveolar ridge. And it would sound something like this, little. While Americans produce the t sound in a softer way without applying pressure. And it would sound something like this, little.
Okay, now phonology is the disciplines that study how we interpret and how we systemize sounds. Phonology is interested in system and what makes the difference in any language, meaning that it's not as precise as phonetic is. For example, phonology does not focus on the variations in the pronunciation of words, but on the sounds that can change the meaning of a word altogether. For example, if we take the word cat from the text and we change the k sound for the r sound, we'll have the word rat, which is not quite the same.
So now that we know what phonetics and phonology is about, we will focus on phonemes. But what exactly are phonemes and what is their function in linguistics, right? Well, according to Kelly, phonemes are the different sounds within a language. Phonemes are extremely important since using one rather than another can change the whole meaning of a word. For example, in the extract, the word cat has three phonemes, the phoneme k, the phoneme a, and the phoneme t. And if we change the first phoneme for the phoneme s, we can get a totally different word like sat from the verb sit.
Now, these sounds called phonemes can be categorized as voice or unvoiced, and vowel sounds or consonant sounds. First, we'll start explaining what a voice or unvoiced sound is. Voice sounds happen when our vocal cords vibrate, and we can identify this by placing our fingers in our Adam's apple. If you feel vibration, the sound is voice, and if you don't, then the sound will be unvoiced. For example, if we take the struck Mr. Dursley from the extract, more specifically the word Dursley, we can see that the sound L is voiced. A vibration occurs when you say it, while the sound does not produce any vibration. Therefore, it's unvoiced.
Exactly. And previously, we talked about two categories. We already explained what voiced and unvoiced sounds are, but what exactly are vowels and consonant sounds? Well, when it comes to vowel sounds, all of them are voiced, and they can be single or a combination that jumps from one vowel to another. We call those diphthongs. A clear example of a diphthong can be seen in the sentence, he was now reading the sign that said private drive. The phonemic transcription of the word now is on the screen, and as you can see, it has two vowel sounds combined. The vowel sound a and the vowel sound u. A combination of three vowels has the name of triphthong. For example, the sound ow, composed of the closing diphthong ow and the schwa sound as in the word hour. On the other hand, consonant sounds can be voiced or unvoiced. For example, in the word map, we can see the consonant p, which is unvoiced, and the sound, which is voiced.
Now we have minimal pairs. And what's a minimal pair? According to Bradley Bennett, a minimal pair consists of two words that almost sound the same, different only by a single phoneme. You have to keep in mind that it's not about the spelling, it's about the sound, and that these two words that sound so similar have completely different meanings. For example, we have cat and sat, hot and lot. You can see on the screen that there is a change in the first phoneme. Cat and sat, hot and lot. They sound similar, but they have different meanings.
So, but let me explain what a minimal pair is, which is two words that almost sound the same, different only by a single phoneme. But what about homographs? Well, homographs are words that have the same spelling, but a different meaning and pronunciation. I will give you two examples of that. The first example, in the text, we can find the homograph back from the sentence, it started back. But we also have back that is a part of a body. Second example, Mr. Dursley couldn't bear people who dressed in funny clothes. The word bear here has the meaning of putting up with something. Well, we also have the word bear, which is an animal.
So we have already explained minimal pairs, homographs, and what's a homophone? Homophones are pairs of words that sound the same but have distantly different meanings and different spellings. For example, in the chosen text, we identify the words by and be, which are homophones corresponds with by and be. For example, we can say this song was written by Taylor Swift, or bye bye, see you later. And we can say just be happy, or I'm busy as a bee. Now we would like to talk about rhoticity, what is, which types we can find, and how rhoticity can affect one's pronunciation. First, rhoticity has to do with the pronunciation of the R sound and if it's dropped or not. Some native speakers use the rhotic accent, which means that they produce the R sound everywhere it's written. And you can find rhotic accents in places like United States, Australia, among others.
Well, other native speakers use a non-rhotic pronunciation, which means that the R sound is not pronounced at the end of the word or before a consonant, usually used in England.
And we have examples of rhoticity. The first one is an extract from the text, and we will be reading in rhotic and non-rhotic accent. I will be reading it in rhotic accent. They were whispering excitedly together. Mr. Dursley was enraged to see that a couple of them were young adult. Why, that man had to be older than he was, and wearing an emerald green cloak. They never him, but it struck Mr. Dursley that it was probably some silly stunt. These people were obviously collecting for something. Yes, that will be it.
And now I am going to read it in non-rhotic accent. They were whispering excitedly together. Mr. Dursley was enraged to see that a couple of them weren't young at all. Why? That man had to be older than he was and wearing an emerald green cloak, the nerve of him. But then it struck Mr. Dursley that this was probably some silly stunt. These people were obviously collecting for something. Yes, that would be it. Now, if we want to see an example of an R sound that is not produced when saying it in a non-rhotic accent, but is pronounced in a rhotic accent, we have Mr. Dursley couldn't bear people. When it comes to non-rhotic accents, the R sound is not produced because it is at the end of the word.
And if you want an example where the R sound is produced in both accents, we have, it must have been a trick of the light. In this case, the R sound is produced because there is a consonant after the R sound instead of a vowel sound.
Our next topic is heavily linked with rhoticity, and that is varieties of English. So you would think that because it is only one language, there's only one way of speaking it. Well, you're wrong. The truth is that there are plenty of ways of pronouncing, spelling, and using English, and it will depend solely on where you're from. The major varieties of English are American English, Canadian English, British English, Australian English, South African English, and Indian English. Now, the main three differences that make varieties of English possible are pronunciation, spelling, and vocabulary. And I'm going to give you some examples regarding vocabulary. We will start with American English. Hey dude, we're heading to the center of the city. Now, an example of British English. Hiya bloke, we are heading to the center of the city. And lastly, Australian English. Good day, fella, we're heading to the center of the city.
We also have a spelling example that we made up, and it says, yesterday I met Lucia. She was wearing a gray dress and her hair was dyed with a sterling color. I was so surprised. She told me she had been traveling around the world, and that's when I realized that maybe that's why her skin is so tan. Okay, you can find the gray with an E in Canada, UK, and Australia, and with the A in the United States. Then you can find color with the U in Canada, UK, and Australia, and without the U in the United States. Traveling with a double L in Canada, UK, and Australia, with a single L in the United States, and finally realized with the Z in the United States and Canada, and with this S in Australia and UK.
So our next topic is really important and is phonetic transcription. Well, phonetic transcription is a way of seeing the written forms, symbols, of the speech sound that you can find in the IPA chart, International Phonetic Alphabet. And now you can see it on the screen. So we just start by giving a definition of phonetic transcription, which is basically a text that was originally written in an orthographic format, and by using the IPA chart, we can convert it to what we call a phonetic transcription. So there's a lot to take into account when it comes to making a phonetic transcription, such as the right phonemes, the stress, if we are referring to rhotic or non-rhotic English, among other things.
We have an example for this. We have the orthographic transcription for people in cloaks, and we have the phonetic transcription for people in cloaks. And we say that rhoticity is important to the phonetic transcription, but how does it affect it? Okay, we decided to take the word first, and as you know, in non-rhotic accent, the R is dropped, and in rhotic accent, it isn't dropped. The same is with the phonetic transcription. You can see on the screen that non-rhotic English is first, and without the R sound and without an R in the phonetic transcription. But in rhotic English is first with the R sound and with the R in the phonetic transcription.
So just a moment ago, we talked about phonetic transcription, and we mentioned that there's a lot of things you have to take into account. And one of those things we said was stress. And that's why our next topic is stress within the utterance, content words, and function words. So first, we're going to start with what content and function words are. Well, content words are the one that hold meaning, and function words are grammar words. They are words that make the sentence grammatically accurate, but they don't have a lot of meaning. Content words have at least 3 letters. For example, if we take be as in be happy, which is a function word, and we compare it to bee as in the insect, we can see that it has 3 letters, which tell us that bee, the insect, is a content word.
Content word includes nouns, such as cat, cloak, or street, verbs, such as drive, stand, stare, adjectives, young, funny, adverbs, strangely, obviously, excitedly, question words, why, what, negatives, didn't, couldn't, weren't. Function words includes verbs when they are not acting as the main verb. Pronouns, prepositions, conjunctions, modal verbs, and determiners.
And here we have an example, which is a sentence from the extract we choose. And as you can see, all the words are highlighted according if they are function or content words. Well, now, finally, we have stress syllables. And what are they? Stress syllables are those syllables within a word that sound louder, a bit clearer, longer, and there is a change in the pitch. It's a little bit higher than the rest of the syllables that create the word.
And it's important to stress the right syllable because stressing the wrong one can lead to misunderstanding in communication, and it can also change the meaning of the word. For example, changing a noun to a verb. And we have an example here. We have standing, which you know that the first syllable is a stressed one. Standing, you know that the first one is louder, is longer, and we also say that phonetic transcription also has to do with stress syllables, because you can see on the screen that in the phonetic transcription we have a stress mark, And the stress mark is telling you that the first one is a stress syllable.
So we just talked about stress syllables. So you probably wonder, but what about unstressed syllables? And that's why our next topic is the unstressed syllables and the weak sounds. Well, the unstressed syllables are those that are pronounced in a shorter, quieter, and lower way. They often have a reduced vowel, and the sound that we usually hear is the schwa, which is a very relaxing and easy sound, and it replaces a lot of vowel sounds. There are three phonemes which are truly weak sounds, which are the schwa, the e, the u, and there is another one which is not always weak, which is the e.
We have an example to an unstressed syllable. We choose morning traffic. And you know that morning traffic, the first one is the stress syllable because it's louder, is longer, and the second syllable is the unstressed one because it's shorter, quieter, and lower. You can try it by saying it, just that. And we have examples for the weak sounds that Ivana mentioned it. And we have of, seen, hoping, and you.
So that leads us to our last topic, weak forms of function words. So we previously talked about function words. They are words that hold little meaning, and they are grammar words that make the sentence grammatically accurate. And as we already said, they include auxiliary verbs, prepositions, pronoun, conjunctions, modal verbs, and determiners. But what are weak forms? Well, weak forms have no stress, so they are weakened, and they are the opposite of strong forms, which is the full form of the word pronounced with stress. Weak forms are usually pronounced with the schwa sound.
And how can a function word be pronounced in a weak form? Well, we have two options. The first one is position. The position of the function word in the utterance will determine if it's voiced in a weak form or not. But not all function words can be part of this criteria. They have to be prepositions, some pronouns such as him, her, them, me, object pronouns, and auxiliaries. And the second one is function. It depends on the function of the word. It can be demonstrative adjective, related pronouns, and the word has when it's working as an auxiliary verb and it's not exposed.
So now we're going to give you some examples, and I'm going to start with giving you some examples according to the position criteria. The first one, it was on the corner of the street. In this case, the preposition on is in a non-exposed position, and that's the reason why that function word is weak. Now the second example, a couple of them weren't young at all. In this situation, the word them is an object pronoun, and because of that, it is weak.
And now we have function. We have he couldn't help noticing that there seemed to be a lot of strangely dressed people. The word that is a conjunction, and so it acts as a weak form because it's helping the narrator to showing the message. The second one is Mr. Dudley couldn't bear people who dress in funny clothes. The word who is a related pronoun. It is referring to the word people that has been already mentioned before.
Well, that would be all for today. And we hope that after this video and our explanations and the pronunciation and the presentation and examples, now you know a little bit more about phonetics and phonology and general linguistics. So, bye.
Bye.